Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode If You Could Hi to Kolob podcast. We are doing Doctrine and Covenants section 1 today. We're into the Doctrine and Covenants. My name's Daniel. This is my brother Clive.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, Doctrine and Covenants section 1, second episode, section 1, a bit backwards, but that's the way the Doctrine and Covenants is set up, really, isn't it? We teach a bit about this section, then we go out and teach about the history, then we come back and do another section. It's an interesting setup this year.
Yeah, the curriculum is good. And I like how the curriculum actually takes time to understand the people. It's not just, learn section 1 this week, then learn the next section next week. It's, I think they call it the voices of the restoration, which is really great.
Yeah, who are the people behind the stories and why is history written the way it is? Yeah, it's good.
Quick quote to start us off. It says, "No wicked man could write such a book as this," this is George Q. Cannon referring to the Book of Mormon. "No wicked man could write such a book as this, and no good man would write it unless it were true and he were commanded of God to do so." Thank you, George Q. Cannon. So we are on section 1. Now, for those reading along, playing at home perhaps, you'll realize that section 1 is not recorded until November of 1831, 1st of November, in fact, of 1831. The church has been established by now. The Book of Mormon has been printed, and Joseph Smith has received lots of revelations from the Lord. So it's later, it's more than 1.5 years since the church was established. And we get section 1. And the question, well, why is that the case? Well, we know this information. We know that in October 25th, I'm just making sure I've got 4 books in front of me, and I've been doing a heavy amount of research for this episode. So I'm making sure I've just got all my ducks in a row. But essentially, on October the 25th, there's a conference in Ohio, in a county called Cuyahoga, which the capital is Cleveland, so Cleveland, Ohio.
And to all our listeners at Cuyahoga, we apologize for that pronunciation.
Yeah, can someone please tell us how to pronounce that appropriately? I've just offended so many people. Yeah. So they're in this place, and they have conference. In fact, it's here. I've got it here. This is from what I've got in front of me is one of the Joseph Smith papers, which is histories. It's actually called the Book of John Whitmer. John Whitmer was assigned in, I think it was early 1831, to record the history of the church and lots of the things that we have from the early days. I think before perhaps Willard Richards. John Whitmer is the church recorder. He's essentially the historian. And so he writes down that the elders assembled to this area, this specific area that I just mentioned, 12 high priests, 17 elders, 5 priests, and 3 teachers, at which conference were ordained, 1 elder and 14 priests, the name of whom you will find recorded in the conference minutes books. And then he says one thing here, which is what led me on a bit of, well, what does that mean? He says, about this time, it was in contemplation for Oliver Cowdery to go to Zion and carry with him the revelation and commandments. And I also received a revelation to go with him. We left Ohio on the 20th of November, 18th, and arrived in Zion, Missouri, January 5th, 1832. So he says just this one thing. They were commanded to carry with them the revelations and commandments. And why is that significant? Well, the revelations that Joseph Smith had were handwritten. They were just written down. There was I don't believe there was any Book of Commandments yet. Lots of things were just written down. And if someone wanted to share the revelation, they would have to copy from, like you would have to copy from mine, or I would have to copy from yours. We would handwrite it. And then if someone wanted a copy, they would have to handwrite from my one, and so on and so on. And so the elders all get together, and we read this actually in Saints Volume 1, that many saints wanted to read the Lord's words themselves. Since they were only handwritten copies of the revelations Joseph had received, they were not well known amongst most church members. And so they get together and they say they should publish something. Joseph proposed publishing the revelations in a book. So they say, okay, well, we need to publish the revelations in a book. And the men who were there, this is now in Hiram, Ohio, probably at the John Johnson farm. The men get Sidney Rigdon, Oliver Cowdery, and William E. McClellan to write a preface for this book of Revelations. And so they write a preface, and some of the men aren't happy with what Oliver, Sidney, and William had put together. So they take the revelation to Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith says, I'm not a big fan of it either. And he receives a revelation. And he receives, Clive, not in this specific thing that I'm talking about here, that I'm kind of making perhaps a little bit long-winded. He actually receives the revelation at the start of the Doctrine and Covenants. So if we look at the Doctrine and Covenants and bring the pages back a little in the introduction, there's the testimony of the 12 apostles of the truth of the book of Doctrine and Covenants. And this is what was received. And you can see it's here, and it's signed here by the quorum of the 12 at the time. And they receive this, and then Joseph Smith receives section 1. So he receives this testimony of the book, essentially, where he says here, Lord hath borne record to our souls through the Holy Ghost shed forth upon us, that these commandments were given by inspiration of God. So it goes on, and it's the introduction to the Doctrine and Covenants. And then Joseph Smith receives section 1.
So when you say receive section 1, are we saying that he prays to the Lord and receives section 1, or he's with all of these brethren and he receives a revelation while he's there and then just starts speaking?
Well, I can't tell you exactly how it happened, but it does say that Joseph prayed and the Lord revealed a new preface for the book. Sidney recorded his words as Joseph spoke them.
So probably Joseph did speak as the Lord instructed him, and it was all written down.
Well, what happened with these revelations is Joseph wouldn't often go away and pray by himself. The way the revelations worked is that Joseph Smith would have a revelation give to him, and then he would literally just say, like we're saying now, he would just say what was in the revelation. And then in this particular incident, who did I just mention? It was Sidney Rigdon. Sidney Rigdon would then just wrote down what Joseph Smith said. So it was not okay, let me go pray about it, or let me go to, a secluded room and I'll come back with a bit of paper. He would receive a revelation and then just say it. One other interesting thing here to mention, the restoration is full of lots of names of people. Some people become close with Joseph Smith. Some leave the church. There's just loads and loads of names in the history books. And in the introduction here, that preface that I just mentioned that Joseph receives is signed by the 12. And it's very good. You should read it. It bears testimony of what is the book, what's the book about. But actually, if you go to the Revelation, you actually read the document that the revelation came on. It's actually signed by way more people. It's signed by other people who were in the room at the time. Joshua Fairchild, Peter Dustin, Newell Knight, Levi Hancock. The strange thing about Levi Hancock, it says here, Levi Hancock, never to be erased. They're not recorded in our current version of the Doctrine and Covenants, but on the original Revelation, they signed this. They signed this, and it kind of goes forth with their names on it. Interestingly, in the Joseph Smith papers record that John Whitmer copied the signature of Sidney, Orson Hyde, William E. McClellan, Luke Johnson, and Lyman Johnson, where all the other men actually signed the book themselves. So why is that important? Well, in early November, Joseph Smith is getting loads of revelations. He's getting tons and tons of revelations. He gets revelations which end up being section 133, section 67, section 68, section 65. He receives all of these revelations, and then he receives, the date is something that we have to do a little bit more research on. But in this particular segment of time, he's receiving all of these revelations. So then he gets section, what is now at least, he gets section 1 on the 1st of November. So I just found all that really, really interesting. I guess that's why I thought I would bring it up with you, because it was quite interesting to me of how the revelation actually came to be, in that there was an issue. The Lord never just randomly says, "Hey guys, here's what's going on. Get this." There's always something. There's always something that comes first. The Lord doesn't just Joseph Smith isn't just sitting around doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I did think about that, a while ago. Early church, there's so much for the Lord to say, okay, this is how it needs to run. This is what you need to do. This. And so for the Lord to say, all right, here's all the revelations would just be completely overwhelming. Hey, you need a temple. You need to baptize for the dead. You need to do the sacrament. You need to do this and that and the word of wisdom and all this. So yeah, you're right. That's not how it works. It's okay. They go to the question. The Lord goes, okay, I need you to do this part. Now you're ready for this part. And then other things happen. Then they go to the Lord again. Okay, all right, now you're ready for this bit. Now you've done that bit. Let's do this bit. And that's the way the Lord works. And so, the church wasn't changing at the beginning. The church was just developing through the
Yeah.
times that people were ready for it. And that's why we have the Doctrine and Covenants, because all through these years, as you said, as the revelations came in, okay, now let's do this bit, and then let's do this bit.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's a lots of promises given. Go to Ohio, there you'll receive my law. That didn't the law, of course, which was the temple, the endowment. The Lord couldn't have said to Joseph Smith after he got the Book of Mormon, "Hey, go to the Ohio." When he just started translating the Book of Mormon, like, everything had to come at a time. Would have been impossible for them. They had to take the journey, and there's certain steps that they had to take. So that's the historical context about how we ended up with section 1. There's a need for people to go and share Joseph's revelations, what they would call Joseph's revelations at the time. There was a need for them to go and share the revelations that Joseph had, and have them from authority as well, not just, hey, copy this, you copy this, and let's go, like an actual published book. They had the Book of Mormon, but they needed an actual published book at the time. And so the preface comes in, which you should definitely read, and then section 1 as well.
So with section 1, I was trying to, because, like you said, it's at a different time. So this section 1 isn't the very first revelation. So when I was reading through, I was trying to, in my mind, imagine why they decided to put this first. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think quite a few from after section 1 are in order, right? 2 through at least 10, I think.
There is well, yes, they are in order. They are in order at the start. Well, they really go back in time, don't they? We have section 1, which is in the future, which is not yet. So I guess if we're thinking about it, section 1 isn't the start. I guess that's what I mean. Section 1, if point A is the start, section 1 is in the future of point A.
But it's interesting the way that section 1 is laid out, because section 1 basically starts with, the Lord speaking to the people saying, "Hear ye," what do you say? "O ye people of my church, saith the voice of him who dwells on high." So it's basically, this is the Lord introducing everything that he's going to say from now on to the people. This is all coming from him through his prophets. This is his voice. And he does that for, I'd say, the first 5 verses, just speaking to the people, saying, this is what we're doing from now on. Listen to my voice. This is what it is. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because in verse 6, he's talking about the authority that it's coming through. For behold, this is mine authority and the authority of my servants. And when I was reading that, Daniel, it made me think back to first book of Nephi, chapter 1, very beginning, where Nephi gives his authority on the book. When he talks about, these are my proceedings, I write this with mine own hands, everything that I write is true. It's just interesting how the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants reflects at the very beginning the same way. This is the authority which this is written, and this is through mine hand that I've written it. And he goes on, continues in verse 6, and my preface unto the book of my commandments, which I have given unto them to publish unto you, O inhabitants of the earth. So I am the Lord. I have asked my servants to write this. Here is the authority. I thought that was just married up so well with the beginning of the Book of Mormon. And, we obviously know that the Book of Mormon is true and the Doctrine and Covenants goes hand in hand so well with it.
Yeah, it's almost like hey, what can we expect? What should we be expecting from this book? Well, the Lord says, well, read the preface, and that was that whole spiel I just gave at the start. How they, they come up with something and then go Joseph Smith receives a revelation for what the preface is. So that's mentioned here in verse 6. And it's what should we expect? Well, you should expect revelations. Okay, no problem. Well, where do they come from? Well, they come from authority. They come from God. They're written with authority. Okay, so we should expect revelations or authoritative revelations. Okay, well that's good. What else should we expect from the Doctrine and Covenants? Well, it should be for the whole church. Okay, well where does it say that? Exactly what you just read. Oh, you people of my church. Okay, so it's for everyone. It comes of authority. It's for everyone. What else is in it? Well, there's some warnings. The rebellious shall be pierced with much sorrow. Okay, that's verse 3. That's interesting. What else should we expect in the book? Well, the voice of warning shall be unto all people by the mouth of my disciples whom I've chosen in the last days. Okay, well, in the book, I'm going to expect to read from disciples, and I'm going to expect them to be voices of warnings. Okay, well, what else is in the book? That's what I really like about section 1, and it makes the most sense. Chronologically, it makes no sense, but if you understand the historical context behind why it's there, well, there was a need, and so the revelation came, and it became section 1. But it makes the most sense now that that's all said and done. It makes the most sense that it's the start. It gives you a forewarning. What are we going to read about? Who's the authority? Who's it for? Well, it tells you here, it tells you everything. I like in verse 8, and verily I say unto you that they who go forth bearing these tidings unto the inhabitants of the earth, to them is power given to seal both on earth and in heaven the unbelieving and the rebellious. So I like that. So it also says, well, then who's coming? It's bearing these tidings, those people who go forth and they speak well, and they share the knowledge of these tidings. That's this knowledge that they have unto the inhabitants of the earth. Those people who are happy to go forth and talk about Christ, or talk about the revelations, and talk about the laws, and talk about Jesus Christ through the earth. To them is given power to seal both on earth and in heaven, the unbelieving and the rebellious. The sealing everyone. Everyone is part of this.
Yeah, it's good. It's interesting. It does talk about the different types of people, those that have the authority of God with the priesthood. Then in 9 and 10 it says, "Yea, verily, to seal them upon the day when the wrath of God shall be poured upon the wicked, unto the day the Lord shall come to recompense unto every man according to his work and measure." When I read this, it sounded very similar to me to Revelation 7. And it's 4 to 8, but I'll just read a couple of things. In 4, and I heard a number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of Israel, and of the tribe of Judah, and of the tribe of Reuben and Asher. And it goes on and speaks about the tribes. So when it's speaking here about those that are sealed to a certain day, it's talking about how we're going to be put in these judgments and going to be judged. So God's talking about, yes, the righteous that have that opportunity to seal, that priesthood power. But then there's those others that when we all come together at the last days and we're all judged according to our own measure and our own works, this is the part where he's talking about there. So it's interesting, isn't it, that he's gone, these are the people that I'm talking about. Also, these people, it's almost like this book is going to prepare us for that judgment. So those that hear, let them hear. And when you get there, this will be what you're judged off of. And, it keeps going to, it gives us warnings in verse 11 and 12. Wherefore the voice of the Lord is upon the ends of the earth. And he that hear may hear. Prepare ye, for that which is to come, for the Lord is nigh. So now he's given us these warnings. So he's talking about the judgment that's coming. Now he's given us the warnings that are coming. And just the whole beginning preface is, here's what I expect.
Yeah, and for your works, in the end, here's what's going to happen. So it's just it's those first few verses are just that really mini run through. It's for everyone. Tick. There's warnings coming. So, and there's going to be people who are going to be of authority to give those warnings. out, what should I do with the information? Well, I should share it. And what if I do share it? Well, regardless if you share it or not, but you should share it. But what if I don't? Well, the Lord is coming. And there's people who will find that day awesome. And there's people who might not find that day awesome. 13. And the anger of the Lord is kindled, and his sword is bathed in heaven, and it shall fall upon the inhabitants of the earth. And I've got, Clive, I've got for the next few verses, I've got written in my scriptures why we need prophets.
Yeah, 100%. I really like this part because whenever I'm talking to anybody about doctrine, as in anybody who wasn't of our church, it always to me comes back to the importance of prophets. Because yes, there's this division, but there's a division there because we have the authority of a prophet that speaks to us, and they translating the scriptures the way they want. But this is what the Lord says in 14. And the day cometh that they who will not hear the voice of the Lord, and neither the voice of his servants, neither giveth heed to the words of the prophets, and the apostles should be cut off from among them, which is exactly what happened. After the great apostasy, many fell away and decided, you know what? We don't need prophets anymore. Christ was the last one. And then he talks about, 15, for they have strayed from mine ordinances. You look at the ordinances now, right? Let's just pick one at random, okay? Sacrament. Now,
Right.
if you look at the Jehovah's Witnesses, for example, the only 144,000 ones that have been specifically chosen are allowed to take the sacrament. That wasn't what
Right.
the Lord ordained when he initiated the sacrament. He said that it's for everyone. This is my
It's for
blood and my
everyone.
body.
Yeah.
So he's gone right
Yeah.
there. Well, you've strayed from the ordinances because you don't have the prophets anymore.
Right.
You look
Makes sense.
Look at baptism. Christ was immersed, but I mean, how many out there do the sprinkle the children? That's not immersion. Then he keeps going. He says, well, in verse 13, they seek not the Lord to establish his righteousness, but every man walketh in his own way, and after the image of his own God, whose image is in the likeness of the world. Well, it is, because how many people in the world go, you know what? God isn't going to hate me for not going to church. As long as I'm a good person, that's all that matters. Well, that's a part of what matters. Definitely be a good person. But that's not what God's gone.
A big part.
Well, yeah, there's a big part, but there's more to it than that. You need to take the sacrament. You need to have the authority of God. You need to be baptized. So yeah, it is a big part, but there's a bigger picture to this big part.
Right.
And it's not.
Makes sense.
But I guess that's what the Lord's saying. As soon as you stop following the prophets, well, then you're going to corrupt the ordinances that I've given you. You're going to follow the world instead of the Lord. Basically, your God is the world now. Your God is what's important to me. How many people comment on my posts on Facebook or, whatever it is. Yeah. It's no longer focus with an eye focus to the Lord. And I just love it. Because to me, it all comes back to prophets. Obviously, there's a lot of spiritual, the Holy Ghost and the scriptures and things. But to me, I always come back to prophets. If we had prophets, we all had listened to a prophet, there'd be no confusion.
Right. I do like in 17, then there's this authority given to Joseph Smith along the lines of exactly what you were just saying. Wherefore, I, the Lord, knowing the calamity which should come upon the inhabitants of the earth, called upon my servant Joseph Smith Jr., and spake unto him from heaven, and gave him commandments. And then there's now a laundry list of commandments, which is again this introductory section, like you've just mentioned, all the things that we've talked about. What is the book telling? What is section 1 telling us to expect from the book so far? And now it's telling us how important prophets are, and it's telling us that Joseph Smith is called with authority. He's the one. Of course, now we have President Nelson as our current prophet. But then it goes into what are some of the commandments and what should we what should we do? And so I find that interesting now that, Clive, that section 1 goes into some of those promises from keeping the commandments.
Yeah, there's a lot. I don't know if we're going to go through them all, but yeah, there is a lot, and it does list them. It lists them, and to me, right, section 1.
Why would it list them? Why would it list them all like that? By the way,
I don't know. I don't know, but look, to me, you could take any one of those things from section 1, and you can build an entire lesson around it. So
Right.
it's good that it's split up that way because, I don't know if it is this way, but, perhaps there's, well, these are for easy to understand, but here's something else that I don't understand. So let's get into the crux of that. Or, okay, we understand this. Hey, who doesn't understand this? It's not because, I mean, it's obviously not listing all the commandments there, but there's a lot of the main points that you can take. Well, let's take one, for example, 22, that mine everlasting covenant might be established. Well, you might talk about marriage, the sealing power. You might talk
Sure.
about temples. You might talk about
Upholding covenants,
upholding. Yeah, exactly. All the covenants.
worthiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a lot just to
You
one.
might talk about the end result of keeping those covenants and the end result of the everlasting covenant.
Exactly. And so, yeah, you can take one little bit of this list
Yeah.
and you can build huge doctrinal points and huge lessons around it. And I think that's why it's there. It's there for the discussion. Well, what does this mean? Okay, let's look into it. What does it mean? Let's understand it. Because the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord could have gone, all right, let me explain each one. And then the Doctrine and Covenants would be 3 times as big as it is. But he's just sort of
Right.
listed it off. And for us to, again, because the Lord doesn't go, here's everything I know and you need to know it. He's gone, you come to me when you have something and I will, pass it through the prophets and help you understand it.
Interesting, interesting. I do like some of these things. Part of it is that faith also might increase in the earth. I thought that was just a really, really simple outcome that the book is hoping for. That faith might also increase in the earth. There's a whole bunch. The fullness of my gospel might be proclaimed by the weak and the simple unto the ends of the world and before kings and rulers. We are the weak. We are the simple, right? We're the ones who we don't need to, I guess, be university educated perhaps, or even be, a speaker in front of 100,000 people. You can just be normal people like us and proclaim the gospel. It's for everyone. It's for everyone, regardless of it. It is for all. It's not an exclusive club to be a part of.
It is. And, without going too much into one specific thing, I like going off of that where it says in 24 that, behold, I am God and have spoken it. These commandments are for me and were given unto my servants in their weakness after the manner of their language, that they might come to an understanding. So the Lord's given it in a way that the servants can understand it and pass the message on. So to Joseph Smith specifically, he's told it in a way to Joseph Smith so that he can understand it and pass the message on. In section 50, verse 12, jumping ahead quite a bit here, says
Section 50.
section 50 of Doctrine and Covenants.
Let me get
it helps.
Section 50, verse 12.
It gives us a bit of an understanding here. Yeah. So it says, now
Okay.
when a man reasoneth, he is understood of man, because he reasoneth as a man. Even so will I, the Lord, reason with you, that you may understand. So basically, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a Chinese person or a bogan from the middle of Australia, and whatever.
Are you talking about where you live?
Wherever you are, whatever your language is, and whatever your level of understanding is, the Lord will speak to you at your level. So I really liked it there because, he's going through all these things. Here's the things, here's my commandments, here's the warnings. But hey, whatever you need to understand, I will teach it to you on a level that you will understand. So no one's going to go to heaven and go, you know what, you spoke really old English and I couldn't understand what you meant. So that's why I did all those things. No, that's not how it works. I spoke to you at your level so you can understand these things.
Moving forward in the section, there's a couple of things that I've got highlighted, Clive, that I think I highlighted quite a while ago. And I'm skipping ahead, so feel free to just bring it back afterwards. But in 37, there's a try this out type scenario. Search these commandments, for they are true and faithful, and the prophecies and promises which are in them shall be fulfilled. So the section is a perfect introduction to the Doctrine and Covenants. It refers us to the preface, which we don't often read. It refers us to the preface, which has got witnesses to the truthfulness of it. It tells us what to expect from the book. It tells us what to expect from Christ and what will happen in the end, and be on this side or be on that side. It's kind of your choice. But hopefully faith fills the earth, and if you do well, here's the promises. But then this verse is now you can put it to the test. Now you put it to the test, you see. So search the commandments, for they are true. So give them a search. Try it out, because we know they're true. And if you give it a search, we know that the Holy Ghost will touch you and you will know of their truthfulness. The prophecies and promises which are in them shall be fulfilled. So give it a go. You will feel of the Holy Ghost love. But if you don't give it a good red hot go, well, that's okay, because you get free agency. But in the end, everything's going to be fulfilled. So you can make a choice, but this is it's a warning, I guess, is probably the best way for me to put it. You can do what you like with the information, but just know it's all going to be fulfilled in the end.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because now it's sort of reflecting the end of the Book of Mormon, where Moroni's promise was, ask the Lord if these things that you've read, if these things are not true, and the Spirit will reveal it to you. And at the end of section 1, like you just read, it's the same sort of promise. Search these commandments; they are true. I mean, this is the authority of the Lord speaking, and then pray,
Yeah.
and then right at the end there in 39, for behold, and lo, the Lord is God, and the Spirit beareth record, and the record is true. So, we know of the truthfulness. You could know of the truthfulness if you pray and, I guess, read these things with an open mind and willing to accept the Spirit. I mean, there's a lot of people that read the Doctrine and Covenants and to choose not to believe it, but, you don't go to it with a hard heart trying to disprove the church. You go to it with an open mind and try and understand the things which the Lord might be speaking to his apostles and prophets, and then, straight directly to us.
Well, that's it for us, I guess. What a great episode. So grateful to be talking about the Doctrine and Covenants and the restoration of the gospel. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. Catch us on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And we look forward to studying the Doctrine and Covenants with you this year. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.